Welcome, one and all, to the Ferret and Raccoon podcast, episode 203. I am your one and only host for this podcast, the Angry Raccoon, bringing you the last podcast of October 2022. And as I've said for pretty much the majority of this year, it's been an interesting last 2 weeks since we did podcast 202. Of course, I'm on my own for this one. Everyone was kind of busy, and that's understandable. But ironically, I'm now off. I have a few days off, and yeah, I want to get this podcast done so I can actually enjoy myself and do a few things, which I think is understandable. But yeah, we've got a fairly small podcast this time around. There really wasn't that much to talk about, so I'm kind of going to really focus on the core of what was released over the last fortnight or so. But two quick things I want to mention before we go into this podcast, and we are going to get a little bit political, I guess. I mean, it's world news for the most part, and that is the fact that our former, who was our current Prime Minister, being Liz Truss, she has resigned after 44 days in power, or as our Prime Minister. One of the main reasons why she resigned, or why she was going to be kicked out, was because that within her first month, she somehow managed to lose this country £300 billion, within a month. She single-handedly crashed the economy. Things were so bad that the pension scheme itself was almost non-existent if it wasn't for the Bank of England stepping in. She became an extremely unlikable figure. She even went on record to say that she doesn't mind being disliked. And I think the thing that bothers me the most about her is the fact that she's come out, risen to power. She is unfortunately a woman. And the last time this country had a female leader was Margaret Thatcher. And lots of people do not like Margaret Thatcher. I mean, to an extent, that's actually an understatement. People loathe and detest what she did to this country. And to have another female leader essentially come in and pretty much just destroy the country within a matter of weeks, it doesn't bode well for future politicians and women who want to get into this kind of position or power, because unfortunately, within the main populace, it now looks like every single female who does become prime minister or wants to be in a sort of political field is going to just be like Margaret Thatcher. So you know what? Thanks for just messing it up for all women and, not really being a good role model for females all around the world. Thanks, Liz. In slightly more positive news, I guess you could say, I finally got a new phone, which is good. My previous phone was embarrassingly out of date. I'm not even going to tell you what phone I was using because it's bad and you would laugh, and I don't really want you guys to laugh. Yeah, but I've got a new phone and I've kind of been messing around with that for the last few days or so. It's actually really fun to kind of, see where phones have gotten to some extent. I mean, I was aware of how phones are and how powerful and how up to date they are. I just I didn't really have a hands-on kind of approach with phones, if that makes sense. But for the record, I have a Samsung Galaxy A13. It's a slightly more budgeted phone. And yeah, I really like it. It's like a mini laptop. And I think that's really great that I can just very conveniently check everything via the internet or other matters like that. And I really do enjoy it. I'm really going to look after it. I want this phone to last a decade or so, because this phone was quite expensive. And given how rough the economy and how tricky things are right now with money in this country, I'm a bit worried that I may have, spent a bit too much and might be in trouble. But we'll see. Hopefully things will get better, or at least there won't be anything that I feel compelled to buy over the next few, hopefully weeks. Hopefully things get better. But enough of that. Let's actually focus on the 3 trailers we have to talk about. Just 3, because, yeah, there really wasn't that much. Honestly, there wasn't that much to really discuss or really be excited about. And even the first trailer I have isn't really that interesting. Oh, and before I get into it, if you do hear any noises throughout this episode, I know it's quite quiet right now because I have a really nice setup. If you hear any noises, that's either going to be the rain, because it is currently raining, and my cat is in the room, and she has not stopped grooming herself. That's her right now. She has not stopped grooming and scratching and licking herself, so apologies for the noise if it really bothers you. But yeah, first trailer we have is going to be for Mothregan, or as the trailer weirdly says, Megan. Yeah, this... I don't even know where to begin with this trailer. So the base concept of it is that I guess, a little girl. She loses her family, and her guardian, I guess, gets this robot known as Megan to essentially be her best friend, a shoulder to cry on or whatever. And then, predictably, it decides to go and kill people like it would. And it's taking a lot of influence from films like AI, Child's Play, and The Orphan, but it's basically Chucky if he were robots. And that's really where the film's problems start to lie. Like, I will give this film this at least. Megan's face is perfectly fake, if that makes sense. It looks exactly like those robots from like the past, like back in the 90s and early 2000s, whenever you would see like a news report or something where someone had created a artificial intelligence, a robot, and they tried to make it look as human as possible, but it would always have this like weird rubber, like questionable like face that just, it always looked off and it always looked ugly. They've kind of nailed that because it is a rather creepy aesthetic, so I'll give them that. There is a nice mash between it kind of being a robot, kind of being advanced, but also being kind of basic and maybe even like prototype-ish. So I'll give them that. Someone who, or I guess the person who, designed or did all that did a fantastic job there. It's clearly an actress playing Megan, which is fine. It was also, I believe, an actor who played Chucky in some scenes in the original Child's Play. But this film can't decide whether or not to have her move like a robot or a human. Like, her head movements are very robotic, as she clearly is like processing or understanding things. Yet she dances like a professional dancer. And this is where things get really funny because you can't have it both ways. And the fact that she's dancing in what I'm presuming is meant to be a tense and frightening scene is just hilarious. Like, if you check out the comment section on this trailer, you can see people are just literally memeing and joking the hell about this trailer. I mean, this trailer, for a film trailer, it's got 17 million views. Most trailers don't really get that, especially more lower budget films. I know Blumhouse is a pretty big name, but I'd still consider it low budget compared to other films being released. 17 million views, and I would imagine 90% of the people who actually watch that trailer are just memeing on it because it's hilarious. Like why? Why is she dancing? Like, is she malfunctioning, or does she like to style on people before killing? Like, I'm not gonna front. She's got moves. She can hit those moves. She's doing like the backflip, cartwheel, all that kind of stuff. Her body movements are on point. I'm not gonna disrespect Megan on that, but it's stupid. Like, there's nothing scary about freestyle dancing. I don't know who thinks it's scary, but it's not. It really isn't. It just comes across as ridiculous, and it just reminds me of something you would see in the Scary Movie parody films. Like, I don't know what's going on. It's just laughable as an aspect. And I guess is also worth mentioning that this is James Wan, I believe, directing this. Obviously, most people know him for doing Saw and Insidious, and in more recent years, he did Malignant, which is another questionably hilarious film. It's hard to say what James Wan is doing right now. I feel like he's just taking the piss at the moment and just seeing what he can get away with because he's such a big name. And maybe this is meant to be a sort of parody on robots and horror, and like, he just wants to see what he can get away with because this is ludicrous. And I mean, if she's meant to be this advanced robot, why is she running on all fours like a wild animal? Like, in theory, she should be able to run faster than a human on two legs. It just looks awkward when the actress is hunched over like that. Like, it's clearly uncomfortable for whoever's playing Megan, and it just doesn't look right. It doesn't make any sense. Like, even if she can do that, why would she do that? Why is that programmed into her? If she is malfunctioning, why is she malfunctioning in a way where she changes herself that doesn't benefit herself in any way? It's incredibly nonsensical. Granted, it's a stupid horror film, but even still, if you want to have a sense of immersion and a sense of believability, you can't have stupid things like her fucking pop locking in the trailer. It's stupid, but it's hilarious at the same time. Like, I honestly hope this film is as funny as Malignant. I'm really hoping that when the reviews come out, people say it is as funny, and I might even go give it a watch just to see how bad it is, because a lot of horror films this year have been really bad and really funny. They've kind of become, what they say, that's the thing they say when it comes to actually making horror films, is if you don't get it right, it comes across as a horror, it comes across as a comedy, and it's the same thing with comedy. If you don't get a comedy right, it comes across as a horror. And yeah, it's just this weird situation where they're both blending into the same genre to some extent. And I miss horror. I miss horror films. It's very rare that you actually get something that's really frightening. But on that note, go watch Jordan Peele's Nope. Next trailer we have, and this is an incredibly divisive trailer and situation, because we're going to be talking about the Silent Hill 2 remake. The dreaded remake that has been rumored for a couple years now, that I don't think anyone was really excited for. I think we all know it was coming and we didn't want to admit that it was going to happen, but unfortunately it is happening. But before I even talk about this trailer or this teaser or whatever you want to call it, it's worth noting that a few years ago, Konami spat in the faces of its developers, the industry, and fans. Please remember this fact before singing their praise about them bringing survival horror back or bringing Silent Hill back, because they've done some pretty awful things. They are a disgusting company. Their practices are really bad. They are one of the worst, honestly. And they've been doing it since Silent Hill 4 The Room came out. It is all the more frustrating that they have brought Silent Hill back, and they've done it in this really odd way. And I'll get into that in a minute, but I'm guessing that the pachinko industry isn't as popular as it used to be. I mean, who would have known that a fad would fade? Because that was one of the main reasons why Konami kind of turned its back on the world, because they were like, oh, we got pachinko. Pachinko in Japan does make a lot of money. But arguably, given how much money certain games have made in recent years, I mean, for example, despite the fact everyone hating Cyberpunk 2077, that game sold really well, estimated at about 17 million. That's on one game. So it is a bit frustrating to have them kind of come back with a Silent Hill game or project or whatever for everyone, because this is all Konami really has, sadly. And yes, I know people go, oh, they got Metal Gear. Metal Gear's finished. Without Kojima, I don't think anyone cares about Metal Gear. They tried to do Survive, and that blew up in their face because it was a rushed, poorly produced, just cash grab based on his work that you kicked him out of the studio for. And, you know, he's going to go on to do great things, whether you liked Death Stranding or not. So, and I guess I would mention as well, I'm not going to be talking about everything from this transmission that they did, revealing certain things, because it's too much at the end of the day. Like, we wanted a game or two, not an enterprise of content. Like, it reeks of soulless mass marketing, kind of going back to my comment where I said, it feels like they've got a Silent Hill for everyone, to some extent. And I've honestly not even looked at these things. All I've just seen is Silent Hill blank, Silent Hill blank, Silent Hill blank. No idea what the hell they are. And I honestly do not care. Because, in my personal opinion, Silent Hill ended with 4. Everything else has just been fluff. But let's actually talk about this remake. And there isn't really much to talk about, because we have the Silent Hill 2 remake, and no one asked for this. I'm sorry, no one asked for a Silent Hill 2 remake. And don't even give me the original looks bad and it performs poorly. No. Silent Hill 2 looks better and performs better than some games released today. And you know I'm not lying about that. How many games release now broken, needing patches? I'll tell you. Too many games release in an unfinished, buggy state. Because this industry is so lazy these days. Granted, the budget and what is expected for games has risen, but at the same time, plenty of games have come out and have proven you don't need millions of dollars behind a game for it to be a success. There are games that have literally been made on less than $1 million that have turned a profit of a few million, and they're not always indie games. So it is worrying, because when the original Silent Hill 2 came out, it was a finished game. It never needed a patch. It never needed an update. Granted, it was a different time. And that was also because when people made games back in that generation, they made a finished product. You know, there was no, I can update it later, which is something that people like Activision and EA implement all the time. Release it now, patch it later. And I bet this remake will have a day one patch when it comes out, because that's just the nature of things now. They never finish a game. It's very rare that a game gets finished. It's different if it's an exploit that people discover. I excuse that, because how the hell were the developers to know that someone can do that kind of thing. But yeah, no, the trailer itself, it looks like shit. It's worse than a fan-made remake or one of those like blank in 4K 60 frames on the PC with the new RTX, videos that you keep seeing like, being recommended on YouTube. It's lazy, it's uninspired, it's clearly a cash grab. All Konami knows is that people like Silent Hill, but they have no idea as to why people like Silent Hill. I can tell you why, but then this podcast would probably be about 3 hours long. I also have no idea why they've replaced James with a 65-year-old man. Like, the character design in this game is ugly as fuck. Like, there's this really weird trend that I also saw with The Last of Us remastered for PS5, where they've just decided to make characters look older because I guess they can. And I guess the developers of this game have just decided, oh, well, James needs to look old and wrinkled and worn out. And it's like, no, he doesn't. Granted, the original James in the original, more supreme game, he wasn't like, a hunk or a spring chicken necessarily, but he wasn't like ugly as fuck. Like, what is going on? And I mean, it's obvious that Konami has told the developers, which I'm going to get onto in a second, they've basically said, here's your budget, remake Silent Hill and make it scary. That's all they have. And unlike the Resident Evil 2 reimagining, which was more inspired by the PS1 classic and could stand on its own, this is literally just Silent Hill 2. Like, it's soulless. Like, I have this game on my shelf already. And they're going to dumb it down with jump scares because it's not scary if it doesn't have jump scares. I'm sure they're probably going to get rid of the puzzles to some extent or make them super easy because, remember, this is a game for children. And the developers themselves are Blooper Team. Now, don't even get me started on Blooper Team because, in my opinion, they are one of the worst developers and studios in the gaming industry right now. Yeah, I know that's a bold statement when you have people like EA and Activision and Microsoft and all that lot, but they are one of the worst because they just don't get it. Like, they wouldn't get subtlety if it hit them in their face. They are the people who made Layers of Fear and The Medium and the Blair Witch Project, all basic as fuck walking simulators with very little gameplay, and they rely way too heavily on jump scares, and they have a very thin layer of commentary and addressing issues, despite the fact that The Medium vilifies abuse victims, which was a horrible thing to see depicted in today's media. And yet you're going to have these same developers making Silent Hill 2, a game that deals with some pretty serious and unfortunate matters. I'm not looking forward to this at all. This is going to be a disaster. All I can hope for is that this is a exact copy of the original game so that we can all forget about it and go play the original game. Because right now I'm honestly quite scared about this remake, because what they could potentially do to this is not only damaging for the Silent Hill franchise, it's also very damaging for very impressionable people who are going to be coming into this game, maybe their first Silent Hill game, and are going to see their backwards and incorrect messages and, think that that's correct. Everything that Blooper Team teaches and tries to do is wrong, and I really wish that people would stop praising them for, essentially doing the wrong thing, or at least telling bad messages, because that's what they do at the end of the day. And their games are just basic as fuck. Like, they've, much like with Outlast, well, at least with Outlast, there's actually an element of gameplay to some extent, but with Layers of Fear, you just walk and you just see things and you get scared, and it gets praised as the scariest game of all time. That's not scary. Subtlety is scary. The abstract is scary. The unknown is scary. Fear is scary. The darkness is scary. These are all things that Blooper Team don't know anything about because, I don't know, they're pretentious, much like Naughty Dog. I don't know. But let's move on to our last trailer, which is an interesting one because we have Silent Hill F. No idea what the F stands for. Maybe it stands for flower. Maybe it stands for something more cryptic. I had a little theory a little while ago that maybe the F actually is going to stand for something later on. I have a prediction that maybe this is the start of a possible trilogy or series, in that each Silent Hill game is going to be subnamed after a letter, eventually spelling something, which I think would be a really neat way of doing things and kind of, I guess, restarting a new series. But visually, this trailer is really interesting, but it isn't Silent Hill. It's more in line with Fatal Frame or Corpse Party to some extent, and there's a few things that make me think that. And although I'm fine with the new direction, I get the feeling that it's going to be a run and hide, like, walking simulator. Like, the trailer implies that, and it's a popular gimmick right now. I mean, Konami is playing it super safe right now. They're not taking any risks, and it would make sense for them to bring Silent Hill back, and it's an immersive, look how pretty the world is, walk around, interact with things, get some story, get some lore. Oh no, the thing's coming, you better run, you better hide. Oh, get the item, put the item here. Oh no, the thing's here, you better run, you better hide. Progress to the next area, you see something. Oh no, the thing's here, you better run, you better hide. You get the point. That's maybe what it is, but I honestly do hope I'm wrong. I really do. But right now, I'm not feeling the sense of survival horror here. Obviously, it's a concept trailer. It's meant to represent ideas and visuals and concepts regarding it. But yeah. And also, I'm not the biggest fan of Ryu Kishi 07. I know he is a writer and a novelist, and his work is interesting. I mean, I don't hate the guy. I don't hate his work. I just don't think his direction is what Silent Hill needs. It is promising. I think he's going to deliver something very creative and possibly something very out there. So I'm interested in that. But I still would have loved to have seen, like, Junji Ito's vision. But Konami has already burnt that bridge with PT, and I can never forgive them for what they've done to PT, because that was a way more promising game than what we have here. Go look at the actual trailer for Silent Hill's PT. Not the demo itself, but the actual trailer they released. Absolutely fantastic. I would have loved to play that game, but this is the timeline we live in, unfortunately. Yeah. Let's talk about some actual positives about this trailer for the most part. The flower, and I guess it's trypophobia, which is the phobia of holes. I don't know what it is. I don't have this phobia myself, but if you do, you're scared of, like, little holes or whatever it's called. Please don't watch this trailer, because there are elements of that will probably make your skin crawl, is what I believe it does to people who have it. That aesthetic is actually really strong. The sort of referencing of, like, holes and, like, fungus and growth and infection and, like, veins and vines, it's interesting. It's an interesting approach, you know, as well as the, like, 1960s Japanese setting, even though that couldn't be more further from Silent Hill, and once again reminds me of, Fatal Frame again, because Fatal Frame deals with a lot of ghosts and spirits and powers that kind of reach out and wrap around and kind of take over the world and twist it. I can't remember which Fatal Frame it was, but one of them literally is themed around, obviously, hair. So I got a lot of, like, vibes from that. And even, I believe, in Fatal Frame, I think it was 4, you see a shrine gate in the middle of water, which actually is an actual place in Japan, but it's exactly identical to the shot that's in this trailer. So I wonder if they've nicked that. But yeah, everything about Silent Hill is Western based, so it's very odd to see it take place in Japan and then still try and call it Silent Hill, because it's literally going to have nothing to do with Silent Hill. We're clearly not dealing with, like, the same demonology and cult ideas, which took actual reference from demonology and Western ideas and, you know, religious practices and ideas. You know, instead it's going to go in a different direction, so I don't know why it's called Silent Hill. That does bother me, especially bothered me when they played the slightly oriented, twisted version of the Silent Hill theme, which in of itself had a very Western and somewhat Italian vibe to it. So I really don't know what is going on. It's just really weird. But the game itself does remind me more of anything than Silent Hill The Room, which is either a good thing or a bad thing. A lot of the visuals and how things look reminds me a lot of The Wall. And, you know, speaking of visuals, that visual of the girl covered in the flowers. I don't know how you say the name of the flowers, because I was speaking to Ace and I think he said that they are chrysanthemums. I've probably butchered its name, but chrysanthemum. That's what the flowers she's covered in are. I don't know if they have a bigger significance in our world, or if there's a reason why it's that particular flower, other than the fact that their texture and their look is actually quite creepy when you actually look at them. Like it's very odd. There's lots of petals on them. You got like the vines and the holes, like almost like covering her body and covering other bodies, as she like helplessly floats there, like almost like an island or like a dead lily pad. It's a really strong and amazingly creepy visual of just like it's hard to really explain, because one thing that's really kind of like tragic about that shot is that she's still alive. I mean, that's an awful way to die, or an awful fate to befall someone. Like, it's incredibly disturbing even at the end to see her face fall off, because if you listen carefully before her face actually falls off, you can hear she's still breathing and like crying, which incredibly distressing. But when the face falls off, for a brief moment you can actually see that it reveals like a new anatomy or a hollowed inside, which it's wonderfully abstract and implies so many things. And it's such a promising like design, as it suggests that someone actually gets it when it comes to Silent Hill and what Silent Hill's about. And that was kind of the moment, or the visual, that kind of won me over and made me go, I really hope this is a game. I really hope that everyone working on this knows what they're doing, and I hope that Konami is like staying the fuck away from this project and just letting them do what they want to. It's the best option. I still don't trust Konami. I still think they're going to mess it up some way and probably implement something stupid like microtransactions or NFTs, or try and like DLC part of the game because they're that desperate for money. But it's honestly very interesting, and it does make me hopeful, despite it having this ugly shadow looming over it being like Konami. But hopefully it is as far removed as from Konami as possible. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast. I know it was a short one, but yeah, there really wasn't that much to talk about for the most part. And yeah, no discussion this time as well, because I think it would be a bit weird if I just continue to just talk to you about certain things. So we're going to save that for next year or another time. But yeah, that just leaves the video of the episode, which is going to be spooky and horror related, and that is going to be the Scooby-Doo project. Now, I may have linked this as the video of the episode before, but I don't care, mainly because this is just a fantastic little short. Although I know I say it's short, but it's actually almost like 20 minutes long, so it will kind of make up for the fact that this podcast was short. And I really should have made it the video of the episode last podcast, when we did talk about the awful Velma spin-off TV series, which I was glad to see that other people had the same sentiment that we did and think that it looks awful. But yeah, so that's going to be the Scooby-Doo project. Fantastic little special they did a couple years ago that's really well done, really effective, potentially one of the scariest things that's ever happened regarding Scooby-Doo. So yeah, that's pretty much going to be the podcast. I have one little announcement I want to make before we end this, and that is going to be that from November onwards, and hopefully for the foreseeable future, or however long I'm able to do this, or if people are even that interested, I'm actually going to start live streaming games. The plan is to be live streaming every Friday on my new channel. I'm not going to say what that channel is, only because I may not be able to live stream the first week of November, because some things may come up. So I'm going to tell you what may happen, but I'm not going to make any promises. So I will link you guys the live stream channel in the description when it becomes a thing. And as part of me having a new phone, I'm going to spend more time leaving comments and updating you guys regarding the community section on my YouTube channel. So if you guys want more updates, want to know when the live streams are happening, or I might even like link some trailers that I'm going to talk about on the podcast, so you guys can get in early, kind of, make your own thoughts, be informed, and then kind of come here and, hear my thoughts to some extent. I know that sounds very vain and, somewhat self-important, but, I just want to, grow this channel for the most part. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And I guess I will end this podcast like I always do by saying I was the Angry Raccoon, and I will see you on the next podcast.